Some of you know Peter Kuss, and for those of you who don't, Peter Kuss is the principal of Golden Grove Pastoral and is in second year. Similar to me, we both started at the same time, so there's a great connection there, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, so I'm Peter. This is my first presentation. Feels like first confession in some way. As Rosie said, principal out at Golden Grove High School. There are a couple of Golden Grove High School people here today, so I've got to be careful about what I say. Yeah. 7 terms into the principalship, and it is crazy. So hopefully I won't speak for too long today. I've got 3 things to present to you, and then hopefully there'll be time at the end for you to ask some questions, because I think that's probably the most valuable thing, is that if you are aspiring to higher leadership levels or possibly the principalship in the future, I've got some insights that I can share with you. Because 7 terms ago I knew nothing, and there is no rule book, there is no playbook. You apply for a position and you go for it, and then you make it up as you go along to a large degree. So hopefully you've had a good apprenticeship and a good grounding, which I have. But when you're at the pointy end, it is very confronting. Did a little bit about the school. So we're about 1,350 students. We're an 8 to 12 school. We're very Anglo-Saxon. We're category 6. Most of the faces are obviously fairly white. We have a disability unit on site with 50 students, which is integrated into the heart of the school. We have about 50 ATSE students and a small international program as well, which we're looking to grow over time. But we're co-located with 2 other partner schools. One of them independent school, that's Pastoral Christian College, and also a Catholic school, Gleason College. So we're a campus of 3 schools, and in the centre of the school we share some facilities. And so neither of the 3 schools has their own design and technology facilities. We share all of those facilities together. We don't have any senior science labs. That's in the shared space, same with music. Some art, some home ec as well. So it's quite unique, and the school's about to turn 30 next year. So that's a little bit about the school. Peter's asked me to talk about 2 things, and I reckon I've drawn the short straw here, because some of the things that he'd asked me to speak about are pretty challenging. So here we go. So the remit that he gave me was the first question: 21st century schools need to adapt to disruptive innovation and connect the present to the future. What do we hope a 2030 Australia will be, and how is Golden Grove preparing students for this future? Why I would like to come to speak on it. No, I welcome the opportunity. 2030 is too far out, so there is no way that we at our school will be talking about what's going to be happening in 2030. So I really see a generation in a secondary school, which is 8 to 12, as really being about 5 years. 5 to 7 years is about as far out as we would look. With that generation of students coming through from 8 through to 12 and that. So what we do know though is that the rise of technology is only going to increase the pace of change, and you all know that as well. And so what we are trying to do is look ahead and work out what is it that students need to be exiting our school with, so that they can be productive citizens, that they can flourish and have a good life beyond school. And so obviously we look towards where are the emerging trends in employment. And some of the places we would look to would be the Department of Jobs. And we had a guest speaker come out from the Department of Jobs in Canberra and speak with us, Ivan Neville, and he addressed some students and as well as some staff as well. And what he told us about was, how the healthcare sector is going to be a big employer. Well, he talked to us about a range of different areas which will be big employers in the future. But what you have to be aware of is the jobs that are going to go. And so traditionally, many of the jobs that students would have gone into or aspire to are going to be lost to them because of automation or artificial intelligence or a combination of both. Things that a robot can do, obviously, is going to be attractive to employers, because robots can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or machines, and tend to make less errors and have less sick days and less complicated lives than humans do. And so the thing that we got from that was that what is central is, what humans can do and can do particularly well, which is relationships, critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, collaboration, things that machines and robots can't do now. So what we're doing as a school is talking about all of that sort of stuff and trying to shift the focus away from teachers teaching content, but it's important that they're subject specialists still, but they have to deliver so much more than content, as I'm sure you know this. That someone talked to us, Professor Peter Rathjen at the recent SASTA conference. He said in his area of expertise, which I think was molecular chemistry or something like that, he said the knowledge in that area changes or doubles every 18 months. So how can you as teachers possibly keep up with all of the changes in theory and in knowledge that's available? What you need to be experts in is how to develop these skills, these softer skills, or the 6 C's that you've heard about in young people. So it's really important that programs and planning that we have focuses on those things. We also think it's really important to have a pastoral care program, and I would advocate always for strong pastoral care programs in schools, but ironically, the school I'm in at the moment is without a pastoral care program, which is quite a bizarre thing, because it is the vehicle through which a lot of these soft skills can be particularly focused on, but I'm not saying it's a responsibility only of pastoral care teachers or home groups or care group teachers. It is the responsibility of all subject teachers, and they need to embed these things into their teaching practice. So it's something that we're aware of and that we're going to be aspiring to have. Billy, who's over there on my left, knows all about this and is a strong supporter of us needing to have a pastoral care program where we can embed a lot of this important work. One of the things that I did want to talk about how we prepare ourselves for the future is what we do as an executive team. So yesterday I met with our executive team, which is a deputy principal, 5 assistant principals, business manager and myself. There's a team of 8 in the school. And every term we make time to do 2 things. So we have 2 half days every term. The first half day we spend planning for the upcoming term when we get all the calendar done. But the second half day we spend looking at either doing a reflection exercise, doing a leadership exercise where we talk about the type of leaders we want to be, or something that we've done as a leader that we're particularly proud of, or we do a visioning exercise or a futures exercise. And yesterday, ironically, we did a futures exercise. And so I did want to share with you the challenge that I set to our executive team yesterday. I talked about how over the next 5 years we will experience considerable change in education broadly and particularly at the school level. We'll continue to implement our pedagogical framework, which is something we're doing. We're bringing our values to life. We're beginning to change our school culture through bringing online new behaviour management processes, which are really focused on the student and our school values. As well as that, we're engaging a whole lot of things. We're getting ready for the year sevens coming to school. We'll need a massive building program. We've got the SACE review changes, which are due at the end of this year, which we'll be wrestling with next year. And we're trying to grow our international student program. A few other things that we've got going on as a school. So what I was interested in hearing from my executive team about was, what sort of leadership positions do you think we would need, both teaching and ancillary, if we're going to prepare ourselves for this changing future? Because these things are all going to happen in the next few years. We need to be ahead of the game. We need to be thinking about where we want to be, and therefore what sort of leadership positions do we need to position ourselves well so that we're ready to embrace the change, adopt the change and take on the opportunities. The second thing I asked them to do was to think about what is the most significant opportunity we've got as a school over the next 3 to 5 years that we need to focus on, that we believe will give us the greatest impact over that time. And that was a really interesting question. Each of my executive team chose to take up and answer that question. Some of them had thought about sort of leadership positions that were necessary. That was probably more the deputy principal and I thinking that way. But each of them wanted to talk about the type of school that we aspire to have. And there were some really common themes that came through. And probably the most common thing that came through was that of culture. And it was really interesting because they all said it in different ways, but it was really focusing on what is the culture of learning that we want to try and establish. We want to have a culture of achievement, of course, and a culture where students at our school aspire to be the best that they can be. Because at the moment, what we see in our school is a culture of comfortableness, a culture of coasting. We're a Category 6 school. We were externally reviewed at the beginning of last year, and the external reviewer said that, yeah, you've got really nice students in your school, you've got great staff, you're a really well-run school, it's very efficient, it works well. But no one's stretching themselves. No one's really pushing themselves. They could be so much more. And they could pick up on that a day and a half into their visit. And so that was affirming to me, because that was stuff that when I first arrived at the school at the beginning of last year, I met with as many people as I could. And that was a common theme that was coming through the 10, 15-minute conversations I was having with leaders and with staff. But then to have it confirmed in week 8 of term 1 in your first term as principal that this is what we've got. But it's a big thing to change. And it doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't happen easily. And so, you've got to be working on multiple things at the same time to try and get there. But it is a real issue for us, and particularly our issue is boys. If you look at the data from each of the different year levels, boys are underperforming compared to girls. We use a grade point average out of 8 to work out how students are tracking. There's a 1.0 difference between boys and girls' achievement in most year levels.
Including senior, like as well?
It does shrink a little bit the further you get up, and the boys do catch up a bit, but no, the girls are still outperforming the boys. And at our school, the girls are a higher percentage of students in some of those traditional male subjects as well, which is interesting. So some of the sciences and maths. So that's my answer to the first thing with Peter, is that that's how I'll respond to the first question. The second challenge that he threw me was, rather than following a political cycle of change, 21st century schools need to engage in a community cycle of renewal, where our school's community is local, national and global or international. How is Golden Grove engaging with these communities with an emphasis on the global and international?
You were just really mean, weren't you?
I don't really want to focus on the global and the international so much, but I will as best I can. But I wanted to talk first about local. So I have a really strong commitment or, focus on school values and school purpose statements. I think they're so important in schools to be really clear about what you exist for and why. And so when I first arrived at the school, I inherited a set of school values, which had been in the school community for, I think, about 5 or 6 years, and had served the community well. But as a new principal, you look at them and say, well, I haven't developed them, they're not really at my core, and whilst I did connect to some of them, they weren't necessarily all the ones that I thought we needed to have if we were going to be an aspirational school. And it had a catchy little title called I Care, and the 5 letters of I Care stood for different values. And so it was really neat, and it was easy to remember. And so one of the things that we did through the first 6 months of my arriving at the school is we revisit all of those school values as a whole school community. And actually we put the power really in our student voice leaders to run this exercise for us. So on a student-free day, all of the staff, we did an activity where we talked about what we wanted as our school purpose statement, what we wanted as our new set of values. But then we also trained our student leaders in running this same or a similar sort of activity with all of the home groups in our school. And so they dispersed themselves amongst all of the student home groups and ran that activity. And then they came and they ran a similar activity with our parents at a governing council meeting. Our student leaders led that. And we also invited members of the public, their families, to also have a contribution to this. The students, with the guidance, of course, of one of our assistant principals, processed all of that information, and then the students voted on what they wanted of their top 5 school values. And staff voted about what they wanted. There was really strong alignment. So our school values now are, the way that I remember them is I think it's RIPA. So it's respect, integrity, pride, which is one of the ones the students really wanted, equality and resilience. So they're a good set of values, but it was really generated locally through our student voice leaders. And we've been really happy, obviously, to support that. And now the challenge is to try and embed them in our school practice. The way that we're really doing that is we're reviewing our student behaviour management processes this year, which could be described as crime and punishment. Catch kids out doing things wrong and do things to them. There's certainly an element of our staff that feel that way. But what we're trying to do is flip that around and take more of a positive education approach to it and try and look at strengths and a strength-based approach and really focus everything on relationships. So that'll be a big challenge for us, but that's important. The other thing that we're doing at a local level is we're engaging in an opportunity called LAOS or LEOS. I'm not sure whether any of you are doing this in your own school, but it's an acronym for the Learning Environment Opportunities Study. So LEOS, L-E-O-S. And we're engaging with an architect that we've been working with through our STEMworks program. And what they'll do is they'll work with us and run consultation processes with families or parents, governing council, with student leaders and students, and with any interested staff to look at our environment. So our classroom spaces, but also our outside environment, our yard and stuff like that. And they will get all of the information from all of these different groups about their ideas about how we can modernise, contemporise, if that's such a word. What sort of changes do we want to make this the learning space that we need for the next 1 to 10 years? They'll go away, put all of that information together, put it into a report. There'll be some projects that they come up with or that we've come up with as a school that would need capital works funding, and then we'd need to lobby government and politicians to see whether we can get that funding. But there'll be many other tasks that we'll be able to do as our own school, using our own school funds or perhaps through loans over time, so that we can continuously work on improving our environment. And I don't know that that's widely known amongst schools, that it's a great opportunity because lots of people have lots of good ideas that you might, it's best to have some knowledge about how best to stage them, stagger them, and be able to fund them, so that you do work on the first things first and the important things that maybe are going to get the greatest impact.
Sorry, did you say this is a department?
Yeah, it is. It's a department initiative, so it's available to all schools, and we're getting on board on that. So that's one of the things that we're doing locally to try and do a bit of this renewal. Internationally, as I said, we are a very monocultural school, our school population, and we're aware of that, and so we're looking to our international program to bring in a lot more international mindedness and a lot more global thinking and awareness amongst our students. So, but we do have 2 languages that are taught at the school. One of them is Spanish, the other is Japanese, and so we are committed as a school to supporting inbound study tours. We have 3 inbound study tours that come to us for 2 weeks from Japan across the school year. We have a biennial trip that goes back to Japan with our sister school, Seto Junior High School. And so this January we're sending just over 20 students to there for 2 or 3 weeks to spend with them. Every 2 years we send a group to Europe, and particularly to Spain, and this year, or last time they went into Poland and Germany as well. So we send a lot of students out. We also have a trip that goes to New Zealand, an outdoor adventure trip that does cycling, bushwalking, kayaking, I think, maybe a bit of rock climbing, but I'm not sure about that one. But that goes out as well every 2 years. And we have an Arts Around the World tour because we are a special entry dance school and we have a strong performing arts program. And so every couple of years we send students to America where they get to work with really, practicing choreographers and performers, and they get to do workshops like that. We also are exploring getting involved in World Challenge as well, so that we can really expose our students not just to our local Golden Grove area, but to the bigger, broader world, and that, it is a very connected world, and they are going to be working internationally probably quite a bit of their time in the future. So that is my answer to those 2 questions, Peter. I better head on now to the slides. So what I wanted to share with you was my top 10 tips, things to be aware of if any of you are interested in the principalship. These are the sort of things that I've learned over the first 7 terms. The first thing is about having decision-making protocols. I deliberately call them protocols, not a policy. I'm a believer that schools don't want to have too many policies. Our employer, our department, has a lot of policies, and then we enact those policies in our school. But we don't want to have too many ourselves, because there are people in your school who are highly attuned to the letter of the law, or they're highly unionised, and as soon as you put something in a policy, if you want to deviate anywhere, they'll try and pick you up on, no, it's not in the policy, and stuff like that. So I like protocols that describe the ways that we are going to do things in school, the spirit of things. And the first thing that I did when I arrived at the school last year was to work with people who were most disaffected and got them on board to work with me about developing a set of decision-making protocols for the school. So for us, you need to be, if you have them, you need to be very clear about when you're going to use them. all right? Because not all decisions are going to be made by the whole staff. That would never work. So sometimes you as principal need to make some decisions. Sometimes as an executive team, you will make decisions. Sometimes as a broader leadership team, you will make decisions. But where the decisions are going to affect all staff and you want their input, you want to consult with them, and you want to get the best outcome possible for your school, you need to fall back on your decision-making protocols. It needs to be very clear about how consultation will occur and how the feedback will be received and goes back and forwards. Then you need to be very clear about how the decision was going to be made. We use a consensus model at our school, and I think the decision-making group wanted to put a percentage on it about what consensus was. We talked about whether majority, 51% would be enough, or 75%. I think we ended up deciding on 2/3, didn't we? I think it's 2/3. But I don't really care what the percentage is. If you've done the right job about setting the scene for why you want this change, you've consulted properly, you've listened to people, and you've developed sensible proposals that you want staff to vote on. Once you actually are ready to take it to the vote, you should already know that you've got 80% probably support or more. And so it doesn't really matter whether it's 51%, 3/4, 2/3. If you've done your due diligence, your change will get through. If it stinks, then you need to go back to the drawing board again. But anyway, really important decision-making protocols. Second thing that I was really conscious of doing when I got to the school is this is a big complex school. I am not ever going to be a principal where everything has to come through me. I am determined to have a life. I'm determined to keep my wife, which is only a little while ago, December last year. So I'm determined to have all of those things. I don't take work home. The only thing I do at home is check my email, and I won't necessarily even respond. Alright, so when I'm there, I get there early. I might leave by 5:30, 6 o'clock or whatever. But when I go home, I don't do anything. The way that I do that is that I empower the leaders in my team. So being a big school, there's something like 24 leaders from B1 up to the principal. But they've been appointed to do a job, and I believe in them. And that's what I tell them. That you've been appointed because someone believed in you, you presented really well at your interview, and your referee said all this sort of stuff. Now go ahead and lead. But I don't leave them alone. And our deputy principal and assistant principals don't leave them alone. I meet with them regularly behind, one-on-one, so I coach and I mentor. We problem solve together. I ask questions, but I get out of the way. And they can come to me anytime, and they do. But I expect them to lead, and I expect them to lead well. So our job as principals and as leaders is, and this is why you're here at this program, is to grow the next set of leaders. And that's a really exciting part of the job. The other thing is I inherited a school which was in financial difficulty. If the school was to continue the way that it was going to bankrupt itself. And so it was really important that I work closely with my business manager. When I first got appointed to the school, it was recommended to me that I should be working with a department person, bringing a department person in to look at our finances, because they were really concerned about where the school was heading. I chose not to do that because I had confidence in the business manager, and I spent and invested time and energy into that person, and I listened to what she had to say. And I was convinced that she knew her job and she knew what the issues were. The problem was that the previous team wasn't really listening. So I was determined to listen, and I believed that we would be fine. It was clear about what changes we needed to make as well. That was a risky move, but it has worked out okay. Because if it hadn't worked out and I had had an egg on my face and we continued to go down the gurgler, that wouldn't have been a good thing. But so going into the principal, you're not a financial person. That is probably one of the scariest things that I had to do, was attend finance committee meetings, and people would expect you to know stuff like that, and you don't. But I know a little bit. But question. Keep asking questions. There is no such thing as dumb questions, because ultimately it does matter. Obviously, you're the one who it matters. You're the one in the firing line. Staff within your means. That was where we were getting into trouble as a school. Is we didn't manage our class sizes. We let too many small classes go through. We were probably spending upwards of 4, 5, 6 extra staff than we could afford. I found some old documents in a PAC folder that said we had 374 classes one year, and our student population hasn't changed much, This year we've got 341. Next year we'll have a similar population, we'll have the same number of classes. That difference between 374 and 341 was why our SASI balance was going down and down and down, because we were overstaffed, something savage. So you need a process for tracking and monitoring your HR spending, and I've got the business manager and I, we have a spreadsheet system that we're really familiar with that we use to budget what we're going to spend on for next year. So we know that if we're going to have this sort of leadership profile, we're going to put this money aside for supporting these programs or these additional release times for these people. This is the ancillary that we're going to have. This is the funding that we're likely to get into ATSI, for EALD, for all of this sort of stuff. We know bottom line that if we want to pay for all of these things, if we want a focus room and library supervision, all of that stuff, this is how many classes we can afford on the timetable. So we don't go broke. It sounds simple, but it's quite complex, but you're crazy not to have some sort of that, and you need a protocol for how you're going to manage your class sizes. How are you going to make these tough decisions that this class in Year 12 that's only got 10 students, might have been a sacred cow in the past, but you're going to say, no, it's not financially sustainable. You've got to be prepared to make those decisions. Have a model for change, because our work is all about improvement, and we can't do improvement work if we don't have a model for change. And you need to be really clear about what that is. And you need to train your leaders in what that model is, and then you need to continue to revisit it. The one that I like to use at the moment is the Simon Breakspear model of change, which is the clarify, incubate and amplify. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but whatever model you use, make sure that it's really, really clear, and then tie it. Train your leaders in it, and then tie it to your SIP, tie it to your decision-making protocols, tie it to your performance management processes. Communication strategy. Can't underemphasize how important it is to have a really clear communication strategy. How is it that you're going to talk about these things with your staff? How are you going to talk about it with your students? How are you going to let your governing council know so they're on board? How are you going to communicate it to the broader community? What are your platforms going to be for communication? Are you going to have a social media presence? What does your website say about you? What does your Facebook page say about you? What are the messages that you consistently want to hit all the time, every opportunity you get? Communication, can't underestimate how important it is. And as a principal, you need to be very clear about what your non-negotiables are. That was a bit of advice that I got from my mentor that I was working with last year. She said, Peter, if you're going to bring in some new change, that's fine, but people need to know where are your non-negotiables going to be. Then they can flex and negotiate around other things, but be very clear about what is non-negotiable. Good advice, I think. Then be consistent, regular, and think about the type of language you're going to use. Leadership alignment, I've been fortunate to have that with my executive team. I expect and I demand robust conversation with my executive team. I don't expect us to agree all the time. Healthy debate is fantastic, because out of that you get better insights and you then will get better decisions. But once we decide, we unite. And we can't be broken, we can't be cracked. Really talking to me is the same as talking to the deputy principal, the same as talking to Billy or Tim. Any one of our leaders, once we've made the decision, unite behind it, and we publicly have a consistent message. Really important. External leadership positions. I was in the, fortunate or unfortunate position where a lot of leadership positions were coming to the end of tenure in my first year as principal, and then a stack more have come in this year. I've always believed, this was advice from Wendy Johnson, who I worked with last year at my last school, was that because you are investing so much into these people and they will influence what happens in your school, they will contribute to the culture, they'll contribute to the changes and the improvements that you're aiming for. Don't take any risks with panels. Don't devolve that to anyone else. Do that and really look for the character of the person. Most people can learn the job as they go into it. If they've got good skills in other areas, they're transferable, but you want to find the right person that you know is going to be a good match for your team and for your school. Yes, ma'am?
This is a bit cynical, but I guess that's something that we've been tackling a little bit in our site is, if it's the same person chairing all the panels, how have you managed that, the gossipy conversations about picking favourites or playing favourites, or you are writing positions for a particular person, like, oh, there's no point applying for that because that's going to be so-and-so's position.
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of the new positions that I put up were brand new into the school and hadn't, so there was none of that sort of conversation. Particularly with learning area leaders, if we had good learning area leaders, and I was really happy with them, there were no issues about their performance. You know, I would encourage them to apply, and I was happy to reappoint them because they were on board and they're part of our journey. It makes it really tough for people outside the school. But one of the things that I would say is that as a principal, I made a conscious decision not to go and headhunt people that I'd worked with previously and try and import them into my school. I've heard that that's happened with other principals, that has had a negative effect to the rest of the team. So I was really conscious of not doing that. Probably fortunate in some ways that some of the applicants that I've had haven't come from people that I really work with anyway, but they've been people in the northeast area who are really wanting to come to the school. So it's a good question, but haven't really one that I've had to do too much. Get into classrooms, it's really difficult as a principal to get into classrooms, but if you prioritise that and you put that into your schedule, then you can make time to do it. One of the things that we've done as a school is develop the Pedagogical Framework, which tries to, or doesn't try to, it describes the type of pedagogy that we want all of our teachers to aspire to deliver. But as a principal, I assume that it's happening, but if I'm not out there in the classroom actually seeing what's going on, I would have no idea whether it is or it isn't. So this term, I've deliberately put aside one day a week where I will just go around the school with my little notepad and I'll just say, knock on the door, is it okay if I spend 15 minutes in the back of your class? Yes, and they always welcome you in. No one's really said, no, you can't, which would be a risky thing, I suppose, for a staff member to do. But they've welcomed me in. I've sat at the back of the room. I've engaged in the conversations. I've put my hand up and answered some questions as well and done a Kahoot and things like that. And then I've just gone around and talked to kids. You know, what are you doing? How's this working to you? All of that sort of stuff. And that's been really insightful. What I am seeing, Billy, is not you guys, but what I am seeing is pretty traditional teaching. And so I'm not seeing a lot of embracing of the new technology that we've been training people with this year. But I know it's early days, but I'm seeing really good engagement with kids. I'm seeing teachers who really know their stuff. I'm seeing students who are doing their work. So whilst the teaching might be a bit traditional, I reckon there's really good foundation there. The last one that I want to share with you is the sort of personal characteristics that I believe are important to this role. One of them is moral integrity. You need to stand for something, and when you stand for something, live it the whole time. Whatever that happens to be, you need consistency with that. So walk the talk, or whatever that saying is. I think people would say that about me. Be disciplined with your time, because this job is enormous and it can consume your life if you let it. And I'm standing here in front of you saying that if you don't do some of the things that I've talked about today, you can have a really successful career and you can have a life and a life outside of school as well, and not have to really compromise too much on either of them. Know what you won't accept. That's really, really important. And when you see behaviour that you can't accept, call them. Not publicly embarrass a person, but do something about it. Because the behaviour that you walk past is the behaviour that you accept. And that's not going to be helpful for your culture in the long run. And someone said to me, whenever you're in this leadership position, smile. Look like you're enjoying the time that you got with the people that you're spending it with. Smile. Don't look like a thundercloud. You know, be really conscious of how people take you as a barometer for how they could be feeling. So smile and remember that. So that's my 2 cents worth.
That was great.
I don't have any final questions, but I'd be more than happy to answer any that you have. Yes.
I've got a question regarding the first question you answered from Peter about the 2030 thing. And so you said that 5 to 7 years is kind of the maximum you can look forward planning as in the principal's position. So who do you to make that proactive change rather than reactive approach in schools that we tend to be always lagging behind best practice and teacher training days and things. Whose job do you see it sitting with to be the person who is looking at 2030 and actually trying to implement?
Well, there's a lot of organisations
Forward
that are
planning.
doing a lot of research about that. So, you're probably worthwhile subscribing to some of those things, and, whether you can get on the subscription list or the websites or their latest announcements. There's the Foundation for Young Australians that put stuff out about how the workforce is going to change. We talked about the Department of Jobs, and we engaged with this Ivan Neville, and his stuff was really, really interesting. But you just also got to be really connected to what the department's saying about where they're intending us to go. So really reading their documentation, stuff like that. Our department is unashamedly wanting to be a world-class system within 10 years, and so that's what they're aiming for. I'm doing personal study myself, so we're doing a graduate diploma of strategic leadership that the system has required us to do as new principal. So that, whilst it has been like another thing that you've got to do, it has been helpful, but at the same time I'm also doing my Masters. So I am getting close to the end of my Masters, and one of the things that I'm doing at the moment is Introduction to Coursework. So next year I do my coursework project. And so I've got access to all of the Flinders Uni databases, and so, boys in education is an issue for us, so I'm using their vast store of articles and stuff while I'm a student at Flinders, and downloading all of these articles about things that I think might be relevant for our school at the moment. Because if you're not a student at Flinders or through one of the universities, you've got to pay for these articles. And so I would encourage you to do that. I don't know, we look at, there's lots of magazines and things like that you can subscribe to, or journals that come into the school, and then going to national conferences, seeing what they're saying, and seeing what the overseas speakers are saying. Yeah. Yes. Oh.
Just the strategy that you mentioned around when you first got to the school and trying to, find the disengaged staff members or the people that were that you may need to speak with first. How did you go about with the strategy of getting them on board your leadership journey?
I newly inherited a set of decision-making policies, documents, but luckily a group had been started the year before, and so that work had already been done. They got to a point where they're about to, accept them, and then new principal coming, so we'll hold off. And so I met with that group straight away at the beginning of the year, and they were some of the most disaffected staff members, most vocal ones that were unhappy with how things were going. So I said, look, no, I can't live with that, or what you've done. Thank you, it's great work, but it was 6 or 7 pages long, and they wanted to tie down every committee in the school and what the roles were going to be in every person and what they would make decisions. I said, no, keep it simple. We want a one-pager. We want to be broad. We want the flexibility that you are the people that are going to work with. And we went backwards and forwards 3 or 4 times, consulted with staff, and that worked well. Also at the start, I made myself available in the first 5 weeks. I said, anyone who wants to see me, every leader had to see me, but anyone else who wants to see me, whether it's ancillary or teaching staff, just make an appointment, and I just listened and I took notes and stuff like that. But I didn't focus on the disaffected people first. You focus on the people that are on board and are excited about what you want to do, and you don't worry too much about those people. They can be the Eeyores in their own way, but don't give them too much airtime and just focus on the people, because the vast majority of the people really want to do a good job in your school, and they're on board. They just need the time, and they need to understand the why, and once they do, they'll follow along happily enough. Yes?
Sorry, I have one more. So when you mentioned about the financial element that you inherited, and you had to reduce class size of like 30 classes, so obviously there was a reduction in staff that would have had to come along with that. How did that
I also
affect
inherited
the
a staff
culture?
which was about 101% permanent. So I had no wiggle room either. So I had to get approved a new leadership structure. So I had to be careful, Amanda, about the sort of roles that I could actually advertise for, because I had to negotiate changes in people's roles. I had to get a new leadership structure in which aligned with my philosophy of where we needed to go as a school. And we were 100% permanently staffed or more. So I've had to rely on people winning positions outside of the school or some retirements to free up a little bit of flexibility. At the moment, we're probably about 98%. So yeah,
So that can really, because you've mentioned the work that you're trying to do with culture and staff morale and that kind of thing, and that can have a really significant impact.
Yeah, so last year we had all of our high permanent number of teachers, but we also had probably 8 or 10 contracts. This year we've got about 2 contracts. So that's where the savings have been made. We've definitely got less classes. We've implemented these class sizes protocols. It just means that there's no contract positions. And then some people having to teach out of their area because they're permanently in their school.
Do you think there's a kind of an ideal model for that? Because I've come under the school where we had almost 30% on contract.
Yeah.
Very low level of permanency. And then that also I was shocked, and I thought that was kind of across the board for those kind of
No. The staffing officer always talks to me about the sweet spot is somewhere between 80 and 90. I probably would. In a fairly stable school like Golden Grove, where the numbers aren't really fluctuating too much and the projections going forward seem to say we're only going to get bigger, so I'd be happy at around 90%. But we were, of your res, we were spending something like 96 and 97% of our res on our staffing. It should be about 91, 92%. And so we couldn't do improvements in our school. Our facilities are getting older and drabber and drearier, and we couldn't do anything in our school that my schools can do because they've got that level of funding in their school to do those projects. We couldn't, and so that was a bit sad. But we're okay now.
planning for the year 7s then as well.
Yeah. So we're in a situation where we are at capacity at the moment, so we have to have a building program, and we won't be able to take the year 7s early. We need to have probably 20 classroom spaces built, because that will replace the transportables that have to go to make room for the new classrooms. So we're going to lose 7 GLAs and a dance studio and a drama studio. We'll have to replace all of those first, and then we'll need another 11 or 12 classrooms for the year 7s. So I don't think our 10 million is going to go that far, but we'll see. Yeah.
Are your classing size protocols, is that like a hard cap? Like it's this number, or is it?
No, it's protocol, so there's flexibility in it, but it does talk about how we identify the classes we're going to look at. We don't just cut things straight away. We look at what sort of combinations we can do, whether they're vertical, whether they're horizontal ones we can do, whether they're a curriculum guarantee subject, and I'll let a small one go through. So, for example, specialist maths, we've got 10 at year 12, I'll let it go through, because I don't want to be the principal that cuts that subject, because that tells your community something about your aspiration. And so there are some that I will defend, and we'll let go through, but there are others that, Can I go ahead?
Okay, I think we're going to wind up. We'll take you off the hot seat.
I love it.
So there's lots of things that we've taken away from that, Peter, and thank you for that. One of the things that I think that people could take away from that last bit of discussion is if you can get your finger in the pie around timetabling, do it. Because it is the one part of the apprenticeship, as you put it, that really puts you in a good stead to be able to make some of those decisions, but understand why you're making them and how they're made and the effect of that. So the other thing that I picked up around what you talked about, Peter, was around, the disaffected staff members. And I think that's one of the hardest things when you go into a school, because I don't think you actually have to find them, because I think they find you, and they find you really quickly. So, it is about how much airtime and how much space that they take up with you. And I'm really impressed. So you're doing your graduate diploma, and you're doing your masters, and you still have a wife. And I'm like, okay, there's probably a bit that I need to learn here.
Do you sleep?
No, I sleep really well. 6 to 7 hours a night. I still find time to exercise. But the key for me has been that autonomy thing. So I've got a big team of leaders. I'm getting out of their way and expecting them to do their job. And when they don't, I talk to them, but most of them do really, really well. That's the key.
Do they sleep? Do they have wives? Is that a casualty?
I'm doing all right.
No, I don't sleep a lot.
That's him.
Maybe
That's not me. No,
Okay. I hope you enjoy, stay for some morning tea with us.
I can stay for a little while. I'm happy to answer any more questions,
Great.
Then I've got to get back.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, mate. Okay, and there's a lovely gift there for you.
Oh.
Thank you.
No worries, Randy.
So around later.
Sure. That'll be good.
Okay, we've got morning tea.
Morning tea. Can we shorten it but still come back at the same time as the program.
Yep.
11:15? Yeah, great, thank you.
We were running out of
That's very good. Yeah, and all we do is a secure so it's not for the public. They'll go in and watch it again, go with you. Get enough from it, but in 20. Very good. What I think we need to do is start there's no template for a principle. So we've had Rosie present this year, Alistair Brown present, we've had you good self present. Every one of you, every one of you highly effective. There is no template. Yeah. So in terms of seeing yourself as a principal, anywhere on that continuum, which is great.
Just starts with
Yeah, so my background is definitely content, curriculum leadership and HR, and I think that's the stuff that principals need. I think it's important to understand that it's tricky to get